The moment Zelda Foster saw the cowboy standing in the dusty street outside the general store in Hamilton, Nevada, with his hat tilted low against the afternoon sun of 1882, she felt something inside her chest crack, open like parched earth finally receiving rain. She quickly lowered her gaze, her fingers trembling as they clutched the basket of vegetables she had just purchased, knowing that if her mother-in-law Constance saw her looking at any man with anything other than complete indifference, there would be hell to pay when they returned to the ranch. Constance Whitmore had made Zelda's life a living nightmare for the past 4 years, ever since Zelda had married her son Thomas at the age of 19. Thomas had been a quiet man, neither cruel nor kind, simply existing in the shadow of his overbearing mother. When he died 2 years ago in a riding accident, Zelda expected she might finally be free to return to her family in California. Instead, Constance had presented legal documents that Thomas had signed before his death, documents that bound Zelda to the Whitmore Ranch as long as Constance lived, claiming it was Thomas's dying wish that his young widow care for his aging mother. Zelda suspected the documents were forged, but she had no money for a lawyer and no way to prove otherwise. Every morning began before dawn, with Constance rapping her cane against Zelda's bedroom door, demanding breakfast. Every day was filled with impossible tasks and constant criticism. The floors were never clean enough. The meals were always too salty or too bland. Zelda's dresses were too colorful, too drab, too tight, too loose. Nothing she did was ever right in Constance's eyes. The older woman seemed to take particular pleasure in reminding Zelda that she had failed in her primary duty as a wife by not giving Thomas children before he died. "You are useless, girl," Constance would say, her thin lips pursed in perpetual disapproval. "My poor Thomas wasted his youth on you, and what did you give him in return? Nothing. Not even a son to carry on the Whitmore name." Zelda had learned to keep her head down and her mouth shut. Speaking back only made things worse. Constance would withhold meals or lock Zelda in her room for days at a time if she dared to defend herself. The ranch hands knew what was happening but feared losing their jobs if they intervened. Zelda had become a ghost in her own life, drifting through days that all blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and despair. But now, standing in the street with the autumn sun warming her face, Zelda looked up one more time at the cowboy. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at the edges beneath his worn hat. His face was weathered from years under the sun, but his eyes were a striking green that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed mask of indifference. Those eyes held something she had not seen in years: genuine kindness. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat politely, "you dropped this." He held out a small handkerchief that had fallen from her basket. It was one of the few things Zelda owned that had belonged to her own mother, embroidered with tiny blue flowers along the edges. Her heart jumped at the thought of losing it. "Thank you," she whispered, reaching for it quickly. Their fingers brushed for just a moment, and she felt a jolt of electricity run up her arm. "Zelda," Constance's sharp voice cut through the air like a whip. "Stop dawdling with strangers and get to the wagon this instant." The cowboy's eyes flickered toward Constance, then back to Zelda. Something in his expression shifted, a flash of understanding crossing his features. He had seen enough of life to recognize a prisoner when he saw one, even if the chains were invisible. "Yes, madam," Zelda said softly, clutching the handkerchief to her chest. She hurried toward the wagon where Constance sat waiting, her face pinched with irritation. The ride back to the ranch was silent, except for the creaking of the wagon wheels and Constance's occasional huffs of displeasure. Zelda kept her eyes on the landscape, watching the sagebrush and juniper trees pass by. The Nevada desert had a harsh beauty to it, but she had long since stopped finding comfort in it. Every rock and ridge just reminded her of how far she was from anywhere she might find help. That night, as Zelda lay in her narrow bed listening to the wind howl outside, she could not stop thinking about the cowboy's green eyes. She wondered who he was, where he came from, whether she would ever see him again. She pressed her mother's handkerchief to her cheek and allowed herself to cry silently into her pillow, something she only permitted herself to do when she was certain Constance was asleep. She did see him again, 3 days later, when Constance sent her into town to pick up supplies from the feed store. Zelda's heart leaped when she spotted his horse tied outside the saloon. She told herself not to look, not to hope, not to think about those kind eyes. But as she was loading bags of grain into the wagon, she heard his voice behind her. "Let me help you with that, madam. Those bags are heavy." She turned to find him standing there, his hat in his hands, looking at her with such genuine concern that she nearly burst into tears right there in the street. "I should not," she said quietly. "My mother-in-law would not approve." "Your mother-in-law is not here," he said gently. "And you look like you could use a friend." Something in his voice broke through her defenses. Maybe it was loneliness or desperation, or simply the fact that someone was finally being kind to her. Whatever it was, Zelda found herself nodding. "My name is Harrison Ingram," he said as he lifted the heavy grain bags into the wagon with ease. "I am working at the Silver Creek Ranch about 10 miles west of town. I have been in Hamilton for about a month now." "Zelda Foster," she replied, then quickly corrected herself. "Zelda Whitmore, I mean. I was Zelda Foster before I married." "Foster is a prettier name," Harrison said with a small smile. "Suits you better." Zelda felt heat rise to her cheeks. She could not remember the last time anyone had said something kind to her, let alone a compliment. "I should go," she said, glancing nervously down the street. "Wait," Harrison said. "I can see you are in some kind of trouble. If you ever need help, you can find me at Silver Creek. I mean that, Miss Zelda, any time, day or night." She wanted to tell him everything right then and there. She wanted to explain about Constance's cruelty, about the forged documents, about how trapped she felt. But fear held her tongue. What if he told someone? What if word got back to Constance? The old woman had threatened more than once to have Zelda committed to an asylum if she ever tried to leave or spoke ill of the Whitmore family. "Thank you," was all she managed to say, before climbing onto the wagon and urging the horses forward. But Harrison's words stayed with her, echoing in her mind over the following weeks. She began to notice him in town whenever she made the weekly supply runs. He never approached her directly if Constance was present, but when Zelda was alone, he always found a way to be nearby, to offer a kind word or a helping hand. He told her about his life, how he had grown up in Texas and come to Nevada looking for work after his parents died. He was 26, he said, just 3 years older than Zelda. "I have been saving my wages," he told her one afternoon as they stood in the shade behind the feed store. "I am planning to buy my own land someday, start my own ranch. Nothing fancy, just a place where I can work for myself instead of someone else." "That sounds wonderful," Zelda said wistfully. "I used to dream about having my own place too, a little farm with chickens and a vegetable garden, somewhere peaceful." Harrison looked at her intently. "What is stopping you?" she laughed bitterly. "Everything. I have no money, no family nearby, and legal documents that say I belong to the Whitmore Ranch until Constance dies, which, given how mean she is, will probably be never. They say only the good die young." "Those documents cannot be legal," Harrison said, his jaw tightening. "This is not the Old South. You cannot be bound to a place against your will, not anymore. Try telling that to the sheriff, Zelda said. He and Constance go way back. He would never take my side over hers. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes searching her face. Then come away with me. Zelda's breath caught in her throat. What? Come away with me, he repeated, more firmly this time. I have enough money saved for 2 train tickets to California. We could leave tonight if you wanted. You could go to your family, or we could start fresh somewhere new, anywhere you want. I barely know you, Zelda whispered, even as her heart hammered with hope. I know, Harrison said softly, but I know enough to see that you are dying inside that place. I see it in your eyes every time I look at you, and I know that in the past few weeks, I have come to care about you more than I have cared about anyone in a long time. Maybe that makes me crazy, but I cannot stand by and watch that woman destroy you. Tears streamed down Zelda's face. She will come after us. She will never let me go. Let her try, Harrison said, his voice steady and sure. By the time she realizes you are gone, we will be long gone. And even if she does find us, those documents of hers will not hold up in a California court. You will be free, Zelda. Actually free. She wanted to believe him so badly it hurt, but fear had been her constant companion for so long that she could not simply cast it aside. I need time to think, she said. Take all the time you need, Harrison replied, but know that I will be ready whenever you are. Just say the word and we will ride. That night, Constance was in an especially foul mood. She threw her dinner plate at Zelda, claiming the meat was overcooked, and the plate shattered against the wall just inches from Zelda's head. When Zelda flinched, Constance laughed. You are so pathetic, the old woman sneered. No wonder my Thomas looked so miserable those last few years. Being married to you must have been torture. Something inside Zelda snapped. Maybe it was Harrison's kindness that had reminded her she was worth more than this. Maybe it was simply that she had finally reached her breaking point. Whatever the reason, she straightened her spine and looked Constance directly in the eye. Thomas was miserable because of you, she said clearly. You suffocated him his entire life, just like you are trying to suffocate me now. But I am done. I am leaving. Constance's face turned purple with rage. You will do no such thing. You are bound to this ranch, bound to me. If you try to leave, I will have you hunted down and dragged back here in chains. Try it, Zelda said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. But I will not be here when you wake up tomorrow morning. She turned and walked to her room, her legs shaking but her resolve firm. Behind her, she heard Constance screaming and the sound of the old woman's cane striking the floor repeatedly. But Zelda did not look back. She grabbed the small bag she had secretly packed weeks ago, stuffed her few precious belongings inside, and waited for the house to fall silent. Around midnight, when she was certain Constance was asleep, Zelda crept out of her room and down the stairs. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure it would wake the entire ranch. But she made it to the front door without incident. The night air was cool against her face as she stepped outside. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the desert landscape. Zelda had never been more terrified in her life, but she put one foot in front of the other, walking down the long drive toward the main road. She had gone maybe half a mile when she heard hoofbeats behind her. Panic seized her chest. Had Constance woken up? Had she sent the ranch hands after her already? Zelda started to run, though she knew it was useless. She could not outrun a horse, but then she heard Harrison's voice calling her name. Zelda, wait. She stopped, spinning around to see him riding toward her on his large bay horse. Relief flooded through her so intensely that her knees nearly buckled. How did you know? She gasped as he pulled the horse to a stop beside her. I had a feeling tonight might be the night, he said, dismounting quickly. I have been watching the road every evening for the past week, just in case. Come on, we need to move fast. He helped her mount the horse, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to hold the reins, and Zelda felt safer than she had in years. They rode hard through the night, heading west toward the California border. Harrison knew the back trails well and avoided the main roads where they might be spotted. By dawn, they were already 30 miles from Hamilton, and Zelda could see the distant peaks of the Sierra Nevada mountains rising against the lightening sky. They stopped to rest the horse near a small creek, and Harrison produced bread and dried meat from his saddlebags. Zelda realized she was famished. She could not remember the last time she had eaten a full meal without Constance criticizing every bite. "What happens now?" she asked as they sat on a smooth boulder beside the gurgling water. "Now we keep riding," Harrison said. "I know a trail that will take us through the mountains. It is rough going, but it will shave days off our journey. By the time your mother-in-law figures out where you went, we will be in Sacramento." And then, Harrison turned to look at her, his green eyes serious. "Then you are free to do whatever you want. If you want to find your family, I will help you do that. If you want to start over somewhere new, I will help with that too." "What about you?" Zelda asked quietly. "What do you want?" He reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of her dark hair behind her ear. The gesture was so tender that Zelda felt tears prick her eyes. "I want to know that you are safe and happy," he said. "Beyond that, I am hoping maybe you might let me be part of your new life. But only if that is what you want. I did not help you escape just to trap you in a different cage." Zelda's throat was tight with emotion. "I barely know you, Harrison Ingram, but you have shown me more kindness in a few weeks than I have known in years. I do not know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it." A smile spread across his face, transforming his weathered features into something almost boyish. "Then that is good enough for me." They rode on, climbing into the mountains as autumn turned the aspens golden. The journey was hard, but Zelda did not mind. Every mile they traveled was a mile farther from Constance's cruelty. Every night they camped under the stars. Harrison treated her with respect and care, always making sure she was comfortable, always asking if she needed anything. On the fourth night, as they sat by the campfire, Harrison told her more about his dreams for the future. "I know it is not much," he said, "but I have always imagined having a small ranch with good grazing land and clean water, maybe some cattle, some horses. A sturdy house with a big kitchen and windows that let in lots of light, and a family someday, if I am lucky enough to find the right woman to share it with." Zelda smiled. "That sounds perfect. The woman who gets to share that dream with you will be very lucky." Harrison looked at her across the flickering flames. "I am looking at her right now." Zelda's breath caught. She had known, of course, that Harrison cared for her, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. "Harrison, I am still legally married," she said softly. "Even though Thomas is dead, I am still technically a widow, and I have nothing to offer you, no dowry, no prospects, nothing." "I do not care about any of that," Harrison said fiercely. "I care about you, Zelda. The real you, the woman who had the courage to walk away from a situation that was killing her spirit. The woman who smiles at the sunrise like it is a gift. The woman who hums while she makes coffee in the morning because she is finally free." "You heard that?" Zelda asked, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "I hear everything about you," Harrison said, "because I pay attention, because you matter to me." He moved around the fire to sit beside her, and when he took her hand in his, Zelda did not pull away. "I know it is too soon," he said quietly. "I know you need time to heal from everything you have been through. But I want you to know my intentions are serious. When you are ready, and only when you are ready, I would be honored if you would consider being my wife. The real kind of wife, the kind who is a partner and an equal, not a servant or a prisoner. Tears streamed down Zelda's face, but for the first time in years they were happy tears. I think I could consider that, she whispered. I think I could consider that very much. Harrison leaned forward slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to. But Zelda did not want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted the future he was offering. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, full of promise and hope. They reached Sacramento 10 days after leaving Hamilton. The city was bustling with activity, full of people going about their lives with purpose and determination. Zelda felt like a different person walking those streets, no longer hunched and afraid but standing tall beside Harrison. He helped her send a letter to her family in San Francisco, explaining everything that had happened. Her parents wrote back immediately, expressing relief and joy that she was safe. They invited her to come stay with them, but Zelda found she did not want to. She had spent too many years living by other people's rules. What she wanted now was to build something of her own, with Harrison. Harrison found work at a large ranch outside Sacramento while they figured out their next steps. The owner was impressed with his skills and offered him good wages plus a small cabin on the property where they could stay. It was not much, just 2 rooms and a fireplace, but to Zelda, it felt like a palace. It was hers, theirs, and no one could tell her how to keep it or criticize her cooking or lock her in a room. They fell into an easy rhythm. Harrison would work during the day, and Zelda took care of the cabin and started a small vegetable garden. In the evenings, they would cook dinner together and talk for hours, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Zelda learned that Harrison's father had been a difficult man, not unlike Constance in his need for control. It was part of why Harrison understood so well what Zelda had been through. I promised myself when I was young, Harrison told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, that if I ever had a family of my own, it would be different, built on kindness and respect, not fear. I made a similar promise, Zelda said. After years with Constance, I swore I would never let anyone make me feel small again. You are not small, Harrison said, pulling her close. You are the strongest person I know. 6 months after they arrived in Sacramento, Zelda received word that Constance had died. According to the letter from the ranch foreman, the old woman had worked herself into such a rage over Zelda's disappearance that she suffered a stroke. She had lingered for a few weeks before finally passing away. Zelda expected to feel something relief, perhaps, or vindication. Instead, she just felt a profound sadness for a woman who had been so consumed by bitterness that she had driven away everyone who might have cared for her. She was a miserable person, Zelda said to Harrison, but I think she was also just miserable. I do not know what made her that way, but I almost feel sorry for her. That is because you have a good heart, Harrison said, but do not forget what she did to you. Compassion is fine, but do not let it turn into guilt. The letter also mentioned that Constance had left no will, and the ranch was being sold to settle debts. Whatever legal claim she might have had to bind Zelda was null and void. Zelda was finally, officially, completely free. A year after they left Hamilton, Harrison took Zelda to meet a lawyer in Sacramento. They brought all the documents related to her marriage to Thomas and her supposed obligation to Constance. The lawyer looked them over and confirmed what Harrison had suspected all along. These papers are not worth the ink they are written with, the lawyer said. Even if your late husband did sign them, which I doubt, they have no legal standing. You cannot bind someone to servitude like this, not in California, not anywhere in the United States. If that woman were still alive, you could probably sue her for unlawful imprisonment. Zelda felt as if a weight she had been carrying for years had finally been lifted from her shoulders. She was free, not just in practice but in law. No one could ever drag her back. That night, Harrison proposed to her properly. He got down on one knee in their little cabin and pulled out a simple gold ring. "I know I asked you once before," he said, "but that was when you were still running, still afraid. Now you are free, truly free, and I want to ask again. Zelda Foster, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you make me?" "Yes," Zelda said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married a month later in a small church in Sacramento. Zelda's parents came down from San Francisco, and Harrison's friends from the ranch attended. It was a simple ceremony, but it was filled with genuine love and joy. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Zelda felt like her life was finally beginning, like everything before had just been a long, dark prologue. Their wedding night was tender and sweet. Harrison was patient and careful, always making sure Zelda was comfortable. It was nothing like her wedding night with Thomas, which had been awkward and perfunctory. With Harrison, there was passion but also deep affection. He made her feel cherished in a way she had never experienced before. In the months that followed, they continued to save money toward their dream of owning their own land. Harrison took extra work whenever he could find it, and Zelda started selling vegetables from her garden at the local market. Every penny went into a jar they kept hidden under a loose floorboard in the cabin. 2 years after their wedding, they had saved enough to make a down payment on a small parcel of land about 20 miles outside Sacramento. It was not much, just 40 acres with a stream running through it and good grass for grazing. But it was theirs. They built a modest house together, Harrison doing most of the heavy work while Zelda helped however she could. It took them 6 months, working every spare moment they had, but when it was finally finished, they stood in front of their new home with their arms around each other and tears in their eyes. "This is it," Harrison said. "This is the dream." "This is better than the dream," Zelda replied. "Because it is real." They bought a small herd of cattle and a few horses. The work was hard, but it was their work, done on their terms. Every morning, Zelda would wake up beside Harrison and take a moment to appreciate how different her life had become. She thought sometimes about the frightened woman she had been in Hamilton, the one who could not meet anyone's eyes and jumped at every loud noise. That woman seemed like a stranger now. 3 years into their marriage, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. She had been feeling tired and queasy for weeks before she finally realized what it meant. When she told Harrison, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." The pregnancy was not easy. Zelda suffered from terrible morning sickness for the first few months, and as she grew larger, the summer heat became almost unbearable. But Harrison was attentive and supportive, never once complaining when she needed to rest or could not help with the ranch work. In February of 1888, Zelda gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Samuel, after Harrison's father's father, a man Harrison had loved dearly as a child. Holding Samuel in her arms for the first time, Zelda felt a love so fierce and protective that it almost scared her. She understood now what it meant to have a family, a real family built on love instead of obligation. Harrison was a natural father. He would rock Samuel to sleep while singing old cowboy songs, his deep voice surprisingly gentle. He changed diapers without complaint and walked the floors with the baby when he was fussy. Watching him with their son, Zelda fell even more deeply in love with her husband. 2 years later, they had a daughter. They named her Rose after Zelda's mother. Rose was a calm baby, so different from her boisterous older brother. She would lie in her cradle, watching everything with wide, curious eyes that reminded Zelda of Harrison's. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. They added more cattle and built a proper barn. Harrison hired a few ranch hands to help with the work, good men who treated Zelda with respect and called her Madam. Sometimes she would catch herself laughing at something one of them said, or humming while she kneaded bread, and she would remember the silent, miserable woman she had been under Constance's roof. That life felt like it had happened to someone else entirely. When Samuel was 5 and Rose was 3, they had another child, another boy they named James. By then, the ranch was successful enough that they could afford to expand the house, adding more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Zelda planted fruit trees and roses around the property, making it not just functional but beautiful. Harrison's dream of being his own boss had come true, but he was generous with his success. When he learned that one of his ranch hands was saving to bring his family from Mexico, Harrison gave him a raise and advanced him some wages. When a neighbor's barn burned down, Harrison organized the community to help rebuild it. He was known throughout the area as a fair and decent man, and Zelda was proud to be his wife. As the years passed, Zelda's parents became regular visitors to the ranch. Her father, who had initially been skeptical of Harrison, came to respect and admire him. Her mother doted on her grandchildren and often told Zelda how happy she was to see her daughter finally thriving. "I worried about you so much when you were with the Whitmores," her mother confessed one afternoon as they sat on the porch shelling peas while the children played in the yard. "Your letters were always so brief and lifeless. I knew something was wrong, but I did not know how to help." "You could not have helped," Zelda assured her. "I had to save myself. Or rather, Harrison and I saved each other," her mother smiled. "He is a good man, your Harrison. You chose well." "He chose me," Zelda said, "and I will be grateful for that every day of my life." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Harrison gave Zelda a beautiful mare, a graceful chestnut with kind eyes. "I know you have been too busy with the children and the ranch to ride much," he said. "But I thought maybe now that the kids are a bit older, you might like to have your own horse again. Remember how you told me you used to love riding when you were a girl?" Zelda was deeply touched that he had remembered such a small detail from a conversation they had years ago. She named the mare Liberty and rode her almost every day, sometimes alone and sometimes with Harrison beside her. Those rides became her meditation, her time to reflect on how far she had come and how blessed she was. Sometimes on those rides, Zelda would think about the night she walked away from the Whitmore ranch, terrified and alone on a dark road. She would think about Harrison appearing out of the darkness like an answer to a prayer she had been too scared to voice. She would think about all the moments since then, the wedding, the births of their children, the gradual building of this life they shared, and she would feel overwhelming gratitude. The children grew strong and healthy, full of laughter and curiosity. Samuel wanted to be a rancher like his father, following Harrison around from the time he could walk, mimicking everything he did. Rose was quieter, more studious, always reading books and asking questions about how things worked. James was the daredevil, climbing everything in sight and giving Zelda more gray hairs than she cared to count. One evening, when the children were in bed and Harrison and Zelda sat on the porch watching the stars come out, she leaned her head on his shoulder and sighed contentedly. "What are you thinking about?" Harrison asked, his arm coming around her shoulders. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest woman alive," Zelda said. "I am thinking that if my younger self could see me now, she would not believe it. I am thinking that you saved my life, Harrison Ingram, and I love you more than words can say." Harrison kissed the top of her head. You saved yourself, Zelda. I just held the door open. Everything else, this ranch, our family, the life we built, that is all you. You are the strongest, bravest, most wonderful woman I have ever known, and I thank God every day that you said yes when I asked you to run away with me. It was the easiest decision I ever made, Zelda said softly. And the best. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. The desert air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of the roses Zelda had planted years ago. In the house behind them, their children slept safe and warm, surrounded by love. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if I had not walked into town that day? Harrison asked. Zelda considered the question. I try not to think about it too much, but honestly, I think I would have found a way out eventually. Maybe it would have taken longer, maybe it would have been harder, but I think I would have saved myself somehow. Meeting you just made the journey sweeter. You did not just help me escape, Harrison. You showed me what real love looks like. You taught me that I deserved kindness and respect. You gave me a reason to believe in happiness again. You did the same for me, Harrison said quietly. I was drifting before I met you, just working and saving money but not really living. You gave me purpose. You made me want to be a better man, to build something lasting, to create a family based on love instead of fear. We did that, Zelda said, gesturing to the ranch spread out before them, the house full of sleeping children, the life they had created together from nothing but determination and love. We actually did it. As the years continued to pass, the ranch became more than just a home, it became a legacy. Samuel, true to his childhood dreams, took over more and more of the day-to-day operations as Harrison grew older. Rose surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, starting a small school in the nearby town where she taught children from all over the area. James, after several wild years that gave his parents considerable worry, settled down and became a skilled carpenter, building houses throughout the region. Zelda and Harrison became grandparents, then great-grandparents. They watched their family tree grow and branch, full of strong, healthy, happy people who had never known the kind of fear and misery that Zelda had experienced at the Whitmore Ranch. She made sure of that, made sure every child and grandchild knew they were loved unconditionally, that their worth was inherent, not something they had to earn through perfect behavior or endless service. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the family threw a huge celebration at the ranch. There were more than 50 people in attendance: children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, friends, neighbors. Looking around at all those faces, Zelda felt her heart might burst with joy. Did you ever imagine this? She asked Harrison as they sat together watching the festivities. They were both in their 60s now, their hair more gray than not, their faces lined with the years. But Harrison's green eyes were still sharp and kind, and Zelda still felt her heart skip when he smiled at her. I imagined something like this, Harrison said. But the reality is so much better than any dream. Look at what we created, Zelda. Not just this ranch or this family, but this feeling. Everyone here knows they are loved. Everyone here feels safe. That is our real legacy. Zelda nodded, tears streaming down her face. I spent 4 years feeling like I did not matter, like I was nothing more than a burden. And now look at all these people who exist because we found each other. All these lives that might never have been if you had not been standing in that street in Hamilton all those years ago. It was fate, Harrison said firmly. It had to be. Out of all the towns in Nevada, I happened to be in Hamilton. Out of all the days I could have been standing on that street, it was the exact day you walked by. If that is not fate, I do not know what is. As the sun set over the California hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, The family gathered for a photograph. Zelda stood in the center, Harrison's arm around her waist, surrounded by generations of the life they had built together. The photographer counted down, and everyone smiled. In that moment, frozen in time, Zelda thought about the terrified woman who had walked down a dark road in Nevada 40 years ago, clutching a small bag and praying for salvation. She thought about the cowboy who had appeared like a miracle, offering not just escape but a future. She thought about every hard day and every triumph, every tear and every laugh, every moment of fear and every moment of joy that had brought them to this place. She thought about how one moment of courage, one decision to say yes to hope instead of no to fear, had changed everything. How running away had actually been running toward this life, this love, this family. And standing there, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world, with Harrison's familiar warmth beside her, Zelda knew with absolute certainty that every hard moment had been worth it. Every tear she had cried under Constance's cruelty had been washed away by years of laughter. Every morning she had woken up in fear had been redeemed by decades of waking up in love. The photographer snapped the picture, capturing that moment forever, a moment of perfect happiness, hard-earned and well-deserved. That night, after the party had ended and the guests had gone home, Zelda and Harrison walked hand in hand to the small cemetery on the edge of their property. Years ago, they had buried Harrison's parents there after bringing their remains from Texas. They had also placed a marker for Thomas Whitmore, something Zelda had wanted to do despite everything. He had been trapped by his mother too in his own way and deserved to be remembered with compassion. You think she ever understood? Zelda asked, looking at the marker that bore no name but simply said, "Those who came before." "Constance," Harrison asked. "I doubt it. Some people are so locked in their bitterness that they can never see their way out." "I feel sorry for her," Zelda said. "I know that is strange after everything, but I do. She missed out on so much. She could have had a daughter instead of a servant. She could have had grandchildren. She could have had love, but she chose cruelty instead." "That was her choice," Harrison said gently. "Just like running away was yours. Just like building this life was ours. We all make choices, Zelda, and we all live with the consequences. She chose misery and you chose happiness. I would say you chose better." Zelda leaned against her husband, breathing in the cool night air. "I chose you," she said simply, "and everything else came from that." "We chose each other," Harrison corrected. "And we chose it every day, through good times and bad, through droughts and plenty, through everything. That is what real love is, I think. Not just one moment of choosing, but choosing again and again, day after day, year after year." They walked back to the house together, their steps slower than they once were but no less certain. Inside, the house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock Samuel had given them for their 25th anniversary. They climbed the stairs to their bedroom, the same bedroom they had shared for decades, where their children had been conceived and born, where they had laughed and cried and dreamed together. As they lay in bed that night, Harrison pulled Zelda close and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. It was a sound she had listened to for 40 years, a rhythm she knew as well as her own. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me that day in Hamilton, for believing I was worth saving, for loving me even when I did not know how to love myself, for giving me this life." Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his hand stroking her hair. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes. Thank you for being my partner, my wife, my best friend. Thank you for making every single day better just by being in it." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, full of gratitude and love. And if Zelda dreamed that night, She dreamed of open roads and endless possibilities, of a cowboy with kind green eyes and a heart big enough to hold all her broken pieces until she could put herself back together. She dreamed of freedom and family and the fierce, abiding love that had taken her far away from misery and brought her home to joy.